In this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, did U.S. imports just crater? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So you may remember over the summertime when the tariffs went into effect and everybody was screaming about U.S. ports closing down and that we were going to see a 1/3 drop in the U.S. ports. And we went through every port, broke it down for you, and talked about the fact that, yes, we're seeing a slowdown. And yes, we saw a drop, but nowhere near the level associated. Well, we've got the same cast of characters making the claim that the last quarter of 2025 is going to see this massive drop, plummeting, I tell you, of U.S. imports. But we just got the numbers for October and they didn't plummet. They didn't crater. They didn't do anything except really hold the same. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. I give you this story over in Maritime Executive. Retailers predict continued decline for container imports through Q1 of 2026. The National Retail Federation issued its monthly report, and this is back on November 7th, expected import volumes through the major U.S. container ports, projecting that volumes will fall below 2 million TEU, that's 20-foot equivalent unit, per month, and continue a steady decline through the first quarter of 2026, with tariff uncertainty continuing, but most holiday merchandise already in stores or warehouses. It projects that import cargo volume will see the usual end-of-year slowdown in November, December. According to Jonathan Gold, the NRF Vice President for Supply Chain and Customs Policy, who I recently met over at the Virginia Maritime Association, he says, "We've spent most of the year worried about the impact of tariffs on both inflation and the supply chain, but the holiday season is here and mitigation efforts appear to have paid off." Story goes on, the NRF's Global Port Tracker projects that September 2025 was the last month with container import volumes above 2 million TEU. It forecasts the final number for October, when the ports have released all data, will be 1.99 million TEU, or just under 2 million TEU. Well, we got those numbers, and it's not 1.99 million TEU. It's almost 2.3 million TEU. Matter of fact, it's just a slight drop from the September numbers. This is from Descartes. This is their monthly report. I'll have the link to the full report so that you can take a look at it. But we did not see that drop down here to 2.0 million TEU, which would have been below every year going back to before 2021. Instead, what we saw was a leveling out, which actually puts this roughly at 2023 level of containers, and obviously below 2021 and 2024. Now, National Retail Federation and Maritime Executive are not alone on this story. We have this one over at G-Captain by Bloomberg. China's exports unexpectedly contracted in October as global demand failed to offset the deepening slump in shipments to the U.S., dealing a blow to an economy already slowing amid sluggish consumer spending and investment at home. Exports fell for the first time in 8 months, dropping 1.1% from a year earlier, according to official data released Friday. Shipments to all nations except the U.S. rose 3.1%, not enough to compensate for the more than 25% decline to America. We then have this story from Greg Miller over at Lloyd's List. U.S. imports hold steady in October, but Chinese exports falter. U.S. imported 2.3 million TEU in October, essentially unchanged versus September. Data from both Descartes and Global Port Tracker showed U.S. imports up 1% in January to October versus same period last year. Chinese merchandise export value in U.S. fell 1.1% year-on-year in October versus 8.3% year-on-year rise in September, driven by sequential decline in shipments to emerging markets. My favorite is this quote here from Maersk Vincent Clerc. "Market watchers should be paying more attention to the dynamics related to China, which are, quote, not sufficiently understood." Now, I agree with that. I think a lot of focus has been paid to what happens with tariffs in the United States, but not enough has been focused on the impact tariffs had in China. I think that has been woefully underreported and also misunderstood. I think one of the reasons we see this recent agreement between Trump and Chairman Xi is Xi realizes the impact it is having on China. Then we have this story over at GCAP. My buddy Mike Scholler puts this out. Import cargo volume at major U.S. container ports forecast to hit its slowest monthly levels of the year in November and December as retailers complete their holiday stockpiling amid ongoing tariff volatility. Jump to the end of the story here. Jackson Wood, the director of industry strategy at Descartes, October's performance likely signals ongoing caution among U.S. importers facing persistent geopolitical friction and regulatory volatility, which drive higher levels of supply chain uncertainty and complexity as policies shift and evolve quickly. Despite this slowdown, the NRF's Global Port Tracker showed the first half of 2025 totaled 12.53 million TEUs. That is up 3.7%. The full year is now forecast at 24.9 million TEUs. That's down 2.3% from last year's 25.5 million TEU. I'm going to wait and hold. NRF was off by 300,000 containers in October, and it's not going to take much more to make up that 0.6 difference of a million TEUs. Goes on, looking into 2026, the NRF's outlook remains challenging, with January forecast at 1.98 million, down 11%, February at 1.85 million, down 9%, and March at 1.79 million, down 16.7%. The developments come as NRF forecasts 2025 holiday sales will increase between 3.7 and 4.2% compared with 2024, the just over $1 trillion. I'm not hammering on the National Retail Federation. I think they have a very tough forecasting model to hit at. But one of the things I think that we're definitely seeing is it's very hard to predict the American reaction to tariffs for a variety of reasons. I give you this story over at Sea Trade Maritime. Trade war disruptions less than feared. West Coast port hopeful of pragmatic solution between the U.S. and China. So this is the CEO of the port. This is Mario Cadero over at the port of Long Beach. This is what he says. The consumers have not seen significant tariff impact, given that the manufacturers, retailers, and others have shared in some of these costs and mitigating the price escalation to the consumer. Both Cadero and the port's chief operating officer, Dr. Noel Hegaba, detail how cargo movements had been front-loaded, with shippers accelerating cargo moves starting in late 2024 and continuing during early 2025 in advance of tariff implementation, leading to 2025 throughputs likely to rival and possibly exceed the record flows that occurred during 2024. Take you back to Descartes' chart here. If you follow 2025, what you notice here is this big dip in May and June, whereas May and June tend to be higher months typically, and what you see is a peak here in March and April. This is that massive front loading that took place. This is when the tariffs came in, and this is when the tariffs were kind of lessened in July into August. And what we're seeing here is people are living with the tariffs. They're basically consuming the tariffs, and we haven't seen a lot of impact as much as people foresaw. Then we have this story over at Lloyd's List by Linton Nightingale. This follows many stories he's done. We've tracked him throughout this period of time and his reports, which are always great. Liner sector defies disruption as box numbers surge to quarterly highs. Global container volumes, not just U.S., but global, up 4.7% in the first 9 months of 2025. Q3 traffic hit a record 49.2 million TEU, up 1.5% over Q2, with August now being the busiest month on record. China's exports pivoted continues to fuel volume gains across the global south. The CTS freight index falls to the lowest level since 2023 as carriers brace for end-of-year demand slowdown. And again, that end-of-year demand slowdown happens every year. The question is going to be, how much is that slowdown? What's the level of that slowdown, and what impact is it going to have? So here you go. We're talking about the cratering of U.S. imports, which didn't happen. Instead, what we got was stabilization. October was the same as September in terms of imports into the U.S. So again, it's kind of a mixed message we're getting here, which I'm not at all surprised about. This is what happened. All of this means, again, instability in the shipping sector, which is what we talk about all the time. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? We hit the super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until the next episode, Sal, sign off.